any of it on me. That's not you, but hopefully you're going to become acquainted a little better with something I like to call outside, which a lot of children today are not familiar with. So she over promoted me that the photography would be fantastic and things like that. It's above average, like a B. Okay. All right, so I'm going to bring you closer. I guarantee you, I make this guarantee 100%, you will learn one new thing in this room today, or I will buy you a cup of coffee back there and a cookie or anything else that gets your attention. They're free, so it's safe for me to say that. So, and a bookmark. I'm being prompted up here to promote bookmarks. And I like the books that are out here. Some of my friends published those books, so it's really interesting to see them promoted here. Can't wait to tell them. Honeybee's a closer look. So one of the things that we have an advantage today with is looking at bees closer because we have cameras in our pockets. You have phones. I've seen a lot of them out this morning. You should not have those out now. And we can make videos in our pockets, and we can take pictures, and those become our witness, and then later we cycle those back at, I don't know, a presentation in the basement of a library somewhere. So this is a little bee, and this little worker honeybee, because that's what we're talking about primarily, is on my kitchen table, which is where I like to have things that are living and capable of flight, and my wife is over here, who is always happy to come home and ask, why are all those bees on our windows? Let's break it down really quick. Honeybees are not native. How many of you did not know that? See, you're deeper already, and you do not get a free cup of coffee. Okay, so they're not native. We brought them in. In fact, when they were brought here, they were called by the Native Americans the white man's fly, because they brought them in not for pollination, but just for honey and wax. They didn't even understand at that point that they were pollinators. So I want to break it down because it's going to be deep on science in opposite land. Nothing I'm doing today will hurt your brain. Apis mellifera. And if we break it down, it's mellifera. Melli is honey and fera is to transport it. So we have an insect that can transport nectar, mellifera. Okay. These are not wasps and hornets. So for those of you who get on social media and show wasps and yellow jackets and say, look at the bees that are attacking my kids, I'm going to clear that up for you. Those were not bees. Bees are super nice. They're social, non-native. They're perfectly adapted to pollinate. And I'm going to explain that. And should everyone keep bees? Absolutely not. All right. I live in Paradise, as you know. I'm in Erie County. I live in Wattsburg, sprawling metropolis of over 400 people. And this is one of our bee yards out there. So I like to live where I don't see people. Just because I care more about the bees than I do about... Well, I mean, I like you. Everyone in this room, you are my friends. Let's move on. One of the cool things about keeping bees in Wattsburg is we're in the snow belt. Big shocker. We're in competition for that Golden Snow Globe Award now because of all the great snow that we've had here in Erie County. This makes it a great test area for things that we put bees in, the beehive. So there's a bee colony, that's the bees themselves, the superorganism, and the hive is what we put them in or what they choose to move into. So just to give you a quick look here, these are different hive types that we stick bees in. And if they make it through a winter here, we've got a pretty good sense of what kind of equipment we need to keep them in to guarantee their survival in a challenging climate, right? So moving on, I know I'm not teaching beekeepers here, but I want to show you something. This is my yard, and I'm sure everyone's yard looks much like this. We have a building just for observation hives. I'm sure you may have been to Asbury Woods and seen an observation hive there. This is for people like me and my grandsons. You want to look in on bees? Bees would love nothing more than for you to go out and rip open their hive every single day and take a look just to see how they're doing in opposite land. So if you're the type of person that wants to look at them every single day, what you need is an observation hive so that you can observe the bees. Better than that would be, I don't know, a building lower right just for observation hives. And we have 3 in that building. And that's so that we can see the progress of bees throughout the year. And we get indicators for the rest of the apiary. Apiary is the term for an area where we keep lots of beehives and they're managed by people. So, and lower left, that is a 3-year-old beekeeper. He's my grandson. He wants everyone to know that he is a beekeeper, that he knows all the things. And we're in the library, and I want to share something about that too. I was excited. He's 9 now. He was checking out bee books from his library and bringing them home. And I thought, that's great. He's going to learn about bees. Do you know what he was doing? Fact-checking the books. So I'm just going to move on quickly from that because I'm just going to guess you don't want to know a lot about hives. Now we're on to the bees. I play with bees all the time. How many of you are aware of what castes are inside a beehive? We have 3. There's a queen. Usually there's 1 queen. And that's what's pictured off to the right there with a little blue outline on her thorax. And the rest are workers, and there are drones. The drones are the males. It's unlikely that you have ever seen a drone. And that's because you don't see them foraging. We're going to talk about those a little bit. These are also videos. So if we see to the right, what I want you to understand is people think that the queen is in charge of things. She is not. There are nurse bees and there's a retinue around the queen. In this particular video, they're preventing her from laying eggs. Eggs are coming out of this queen and the workers are following her around and consuming the eggs. There's a lot of reasons why they do that, but I'm just, in general terms, I want to explain that the queen is actually the source of all reproduction in the hive, but is not in charge of anything at all. So they are driven by pheromones, nutrition, the environment, and all those other aspects. Now, I like to catch swarms, put them in a butterfly net, which is going on here on the left, and we see that a queen climbs up, and she's on the right. Let me see if I can point this out. See the one with the large, dark thorax climbing up and going in? The way I install bees into my hives is I allow them to volunteer to go in or reject the hive configuration that I've given them. And if they fly away, that's fine. But if the queen goes in, all the others raise their abdomens and fan an azonoff gland that spreads a pheromone that tells the rest of the bees, this is where we elect to live. Now that's one area where a queen can decide what happens in a hive. If the queen refuses to go in, they can't occupy it. They need to convince her to go in, right? It's all up to the workers to decide, and they can reject and even kill their queen. I'm going to tell you a sad story today too, so get ready. You might be crying your eyeballs out, just letting you know. Some of the things that beekeepers like to do is we like to mark the queens too. Now, a lot of beekeepers never do that. Until I started marking them with a marking pen, I thought, I had queens living for years. And then when I started marking them, they were disappearing every 6 months during the summer. 5 or 6 months, they would disappear and be re-queened. So marking queens is a lot of fun unless when you're marking them, your queen decides that she no longer likes where she's living. And sometimes you go to install a queen and she can just fly away all on her own. They're a social insect. They cannot live alone. So this queen on her own, is she lost? Would she die? Most beekeepers would say, I bought this queen from California. She came in here. I went to put her in my hive. She flew away. That was $60 down the tube. I'm so mad. My point is, I don't think she's alone out there because her pheromones went into the air. And if there are other bees in the area, do you think they would just find that queen, join up and save her life? How many think that would happen? How many think it would not happen? She just perish. She'd just go out on her own. Commit one way or the other. Half of you are not raising your hands. Okay. I don't like these neutral things where after I'm done, they go, yeah, that's what I thought. Here's the queen. She has a retinue around her. These are the bees that attend to her. Once she's mated and comes back to a hive, she doesn't fly out again unless the colony is reproducing at colony level. So she's inside. Even her waste material is carried out by the nurse bees. She is groomed and fed 24/7. A queen can lay her body weight in eggs every 24 hours, not during the winter time. When spring comes and resources start coming in, around here it's when the dandelions start blooming in abundance. You see these hives start to reproduce and really kick up. 1,500 to 2,000 eggs every day. Now, what's cool about that is, just like a chicken egg, it takes 21 days from the time the egg is laid to the time an adult emerges. Now, chickens don't emerge as adults, but bees do in 21 days. So at the far end of that, that means 1,500 to 2,000 new adult bees are in that colony every single day after the queen has begun laying. Think about that. This is why we get lots of bees. I bet you want to see a picture of lots of bees. So this is a picture of a single frame in a hive. And dead center is the queen. You can kind of pick her out. She's the largest one. But this is much more organized than it seems, but I like to show this to people. Let's move on. I want to show you this little rascal. Who knows what that is? If you're a beekeeper, keep your hand out. Anyone else know what that is? Somebody said drone. Who was that? Are you a beekeeper?
No.
You get credit. Okay. It's a drone. It's a male bee. Chances are you've never seen one. If you have, it's dead or dying, and what you are near is a drone congregation area, which I don't want to get too graphic, although I don't see children here. Drone congregation areas are the singles bar for bees. Drones, the males, their entire purpose in life is to reproduce. How do they reproduce? They mate with a virgin queen. It takes them a lot of energy to fly anywhere, and then they loiter in this drone congregation area, hundreds of feet in the air in some cases, and they can only stick around for about 10 minutes. So think about this. They're at their hive. They get fed by nurse bee. Drones do not feed themselves. Drones do no work. And when you're talking to middle school kids, the boys get all like, yeah, that's great. You know? So, but I want you to pay attention to that. They take off, they fly out. They're hoping in that 10 minutes a virgin queen shows up. What are the chances? Almost none. And when one shows up, there's a drone comet. Think about thousands of drones after a single unmated queen that shows up. And now she can accept or reject them on the wing, so it even gets worse. So you might have beat the odds. It might be the 10 minutes that you're in there. This is your chance. And she closes herself up and says no to you. She will mate. Now, I want to explain this about the virgin queen. She needs 2 or 3 drones to fill her spermatheca that will satisfy her reproductive needs for her entire life. However, she's likely to hang out in number 4. Look at number 5, 6, 10 drones, 11 drones. What's she doing? I don't know, because there's no more practical purpose for this behavior. And then she comes back to the hive with what we call mating sign. What that is the reproductive organ of the last drone that mated with her is still attached, because when the males mate with the queen, they lose their reproductive organs. And they die. Yeah. So for those that were all excited about being a male bee, now, I want you to look at the eyes on these things. They have lenses on their eyes. These are called compound eyes. Bees, workers, or drones, or queen, they all have 5 eyes. They have different purposes. Now these lenses on these eyes, which you can't make out right here, are hexagonal, just like their cells. What if I told you there are up to 5,000 lenses on just one of these eyes? And the reason they come together at the top is so they can see unmated queens better on the wing. So this is a perfect machine for reproduction only. The drone is very expensive. I'm not going to keep making you look at that handsome face. We'll move on. Close-up of the eye, an above average image, I might point out, of a worker bee now. But if you notice that the eyes on bees also have hairs on them. So it's much like if you picked up a pencil, don't stab yourself in the eye, but if you aligned it perpendicular to the surface of your eye, you don't really see the pencil very much. So these hairs are like that. They stick out between the lenses of the eye. The female, the worker, has about 2,500 lenses. They're not even the same size. They're different sizes, but they're also hexagonal, and they have guard hairs to protect them. So part of what I'm going to talk to you about today, notice the hairs on the fringe. See how they look different? They're called plumose hairs. They're branched. They have a different purpose, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. So let's move on. I do want to show you some features again. Look to the right, and we have very distinctive, the drone, the male. Look how big he is. Next to him, facing the other direction, is a young, newly emerged worker bee. So that means she's at her 22nd day of life, right? Some of the time she was an egg. And look at the scale of even the wings. The drone has a huge engine. The thorax, so they're in three parts: head, thorax, abdomen. And the wings, so all the machinery or the musculature is in that thorax. That's where all the legs are connected, the muscles for the wings are there, and the drone is the biggest consumer in the hive. 4 times more food than a worker. What's its contribution? None. Not only that, they're such freeloaders. A drone can fly out from your hive where they attended to him, where they invested in him, where they fed him, where they put up with his nonsense, and then one day he flies off, and what does he do? Lands on the landing board of another hive a mile away, and they welcome him. And then he goes up and he starts hitting them in the face with his forelimbs until they feed him. They're beggars. It's persistent. And then what does he do after that? Flies off, tries to find well, we know the story. Let's just keep moving. Everything. The females do everything. And I want to show you another thing. Let's be sad for the drone for a minute. The drone congregation area in the air is one thing. This is a drone congregation area on that left video there that's going on. And you can tell them by their oversized heads that they're all facing one another. They're not begging for food anymore because what's happened? It's October. What happens in October? No new food's coming in. Do the females need these males anymore for reproduction? They do not. So what do? They starve them. They stop feeding them. So for those of you who think that honeybees are the very epitome of empathy, we just love honeybees. They're so fuzzy. They care about everything. Try being a drone. Because they are cutting them out. See the little worker in there? She's forcing them out of their little huddle, and they're going to push them out into the cold and the wet and the rain. Imagine the weather right now and being a drone who's been starved, and you're shoved out there by the very bees that raised you. Still good to be the male? I don't think so. So another thing I want to show you, this is a close-up. These are the workers. The out-of-focus eyeballs, lower left there, eyeballs, probably not a very good term, but see that tiny tongue sticking out, that little root beer colored tongue? That is a drone's tongue, which shows that he cannot forage for himself. He can't access nectar. He does no pollination. I have people that write me weekly that want me to promote the benefits of the drone, and I just can't do it. We actually don't need him, but he's constantly begging. But that little tongue and the size of his head. If you could look at worker cells where honey is stored inside the hive, when they have honey in that cell, and that drone, let's say he wanted to feed himself, his oversized head, much like my grandson's, would not fit into that little cell. He can't do it. He has to be fed. The other thing is he can't just eat honey. He needs vitellogenin. He needs real food that's developed by nurse bees at a very specific time in their life, right? So moving on, let's put this all together. They raised him from the time he hatched as an egg on his 4th day. They fed him, the nurse bees did, day and night. They kept him warm at 94 to 97 degrees Fahrenheit, day and night, to guarantee that he would survive. He emerged at 24 days, not 21, because remember, he needs to take up as many resources as possible before he emerges. And I use that term loosely because a nurse bee has to cut open his cap from his pupa phase. He doesn't even do that on his own because his mandibles are too tiny. And what happens while the workers are chewing off this cap? What does this male bee do? Waits to be fed through that new opening. So he just sits there, feed me. And he comes out, and they clean him up. He doesn't even clean himself. He won't comb his hair. All right. They carry, you go outside your apiary, and what's on the landing board? Look at that, that's a drone. In the rain, life is good for the male bee. All right, now what would make this better is if that were a video, because I want you to feel his sadness, and it is. So if you see his little limbs moving, they stop feeding him, they stop shielding him, they won't house him anymore. They lock onto his little feet. There'll be 6 worker bees on one drone while he tries to drag them around. It's pitiful. Just insert the violin music. And so now he's out here and he's dying. What does the beekeeper do? The beekeeper brings him in and puts him on the kitchen table for a video. He's gonna die. I can't believe that you're laughing at his expense. But listen, this is science, my citizen friends. So, he's on the kitchen table. What?
I said at least he died in the starting role.
Yes, he dies and he lives forever. Look, he's living now. Okay. But this is a teaching opportunity. So he's on the kitchen table. He's been brought in from the cold. So there's lots of condensation on him. Thus he's wet. This looks like a okay still image, but it's not. It's a video. But I don't want to show you the video part yet because I want you to look at the sides of the abdomen. I don't have a pointer. Let me walk over here. I'm sure you're wondering, Fred, how do insects breathe? They can stick their heads completely in a liquid and still breathe, but we see their abdomens pulsing, right? These little crescents here, these are called spiracles, and they breathe through them. That's the respiratory system. Now, what I want you to see is the physical design of the bee, which is really cool. Let's see if he'll move his abdomen, and he does. All these plates expand and contract. This is the respiratory and circulatory system of the bee. So the workers have it too. It just happens that drones are oversized, and since this one happened to be dying in public, I took advantage of it. And so diametrically and extension lengthwise, he expands and contracts. So the spiracles are connected to trachea, and the trachea are connected to tracheoles, and the tracheoles filter down much like your capillaries. So this, when you see their abdomens expanding and contracting, you've got an insect that's alive. And I want to move on to something else here today. What is that? Let me get the video going. The squirrel. This is an analogy, by the way. And that's one of those red squirrels. If you have squirrels, fox squirrels, gray squirrels, the red squirrels are the number one thieves. Number one reason squirrels lose their nuts? Other squirrels? Okay. So this squirrel is eating as much as it can, just like a beehive is trying to gain weight so it can get through winter. Beehives gain weight by storing honey and resources like that and pollen for protein. And so this little squirrel is doing his very best. And most of you would look at him and go, I want to rescue that squirrel. That's my wife. So I ignore all of that. There's another reason I want you to look at the squirrel. What does it have on it that keeps it from getting cold? Fur. Fur composed of individual hairs. Oh, somebody went follicles on me. That's a hard no. Okay. What does the fur on a squirrel have to do with the hairs on a bee? What if I told you there are the same number of hairs on even a fox squirrel as there are on a single worker honeybee? Who did not know that? No free coffee for you. Okay. So, 3 million hairs, give or take 3. So bees are covered in hair, so I'm going to talk about that. Part of this is called Hair It Is. Look at that face. That is a worker honeybee. She's got little mandibles, are partly open. But what I really want you to see is every surface. Bees are insects. They have an exoskeleton, okay? And there are little hairs on every part of it. And we only know that because we can look at them at a microscopic level. And now through the magic of micro photography, we can see that these little hairs are also attached to sensors and that they know what they're doing based on physical touch, even though it seems like, unlike your skin, which has nerves built into it, their nerves are attached to their hairs. So let's move on. They use their hairs to pollinate. They get the pollen to stick to their bodies. Has anyone here seen pink pollen anthers before? Any guess what that plant is called? It's a hydrangea. It's called, and you need this on a shirt, guys, Pinky Winky. Just get a t-shirt that says, I love Pinky Winky. So what's really cool about that is, it's getting the pollen off of there, and look at the hind leg up here. The pollen is actually being pressed in a joint on its hind leg. Guess what it's called? The pollen press. And they work that up into their hind leg. Remember this, because you're going to want to use this word many times for the rest of the day. It's called the corbicula, which are little stiff hairs. Can you say that to the person next to you? I prefer corbicula. Say it to somebody next to you. Okay. And follow that up with, and I want it to be emotional, bees are above average. Say it right now to somebody. Bees are above average. Okay, good. Okay, so they use their hairs. When they fly through the air, because they have so many hairs, it's like rubbing a balloon on your head. You create a static charge, and then you can stick it on the wall or the ceiling. Did you ever do that as a child? I hope you did. Sometimes, okay. So you still do it. Okay, we have someone that admits he has a problem with balloons up front. Okay. So the dandelion, by the way, the easiest way to see bees in your yard, which, by the way, back in 2006, when I was looking for a colony collapse, I walked through a field, I looked at all the dandelions, I saw no bees, and I panicked. That was the beginning of my beekeeping days. I wanted there to be bees, and I wanted to watch the bees. But here's the thing. If you look at the pollen on the back of the bees' legs, first of all, they're always perfectly balanced. You see a pollen clump on each hind leg, which is, what's the term for it? The corbicula. Yes, thank you. Okay, now notice it's Cheeto orange, but the flower that it's on and the pollen anthers that are on that flower are pale yellow. Sorry for the plosives. But it's adding to it. So while it's collecting the pollen can often just fly off into the air. So they carry nectar with them, and in some cases honey with them, and they use that to stick it together so that it will hold together and form these pollen clumps on their pollen baskets. And off we go. I'm going to shock you a little bit because we love the bee. Look at that. My grandson asked me over and over, "Grandfather, why are bees so cute?" Well, their eyes are big, they're fuzzy. They make us like them. I don't know why that is. Something with big eyes, but let's look at something that's not so pleasant. What is that? So I make this comparison because I was set up to photograph bees on spirulina, which is an algae that bees benefit nutritionally from. And wouldn't you know it, this blowfly shows up, and I just decided, let me take this random picture of a blowfly and make a comparison to the bee and just look at how ugly that is. Look how it lacks hairs. Also, someone that studies disease and the transfer of disease from insects said better 1,000 cockroaches should crawl over your face while you sleep than one fly should land on you. I want you to visualize that. Because flies dwell in high bacteria areas. Walk past a dead anything and it's covered in flies. That's the fly that landed on your nose while you were eating your hamburger. Okay? And look at the proboscis on that thing. Just look at it. It regurgitates acids and all the other ooze that it's been on for the past hour onto something else and dissolves some of it and sucks it all back in and then runs along your arm on a sweaty summer day and does that little dabbling thing that it does, spreading germs and bacteria all over you. Okay, that's enough. I know that was fun. Let's look at the tools that the bee has. Top left, the mandibles. These mandibles on a honeybee, again, fringed with hairs. Think of all the things a honeybee does with its mandibles. It can bite another bee if it's unhappy with them. Bees can bite you. Bees bit my grandson. He was not happy about it. They also shape beeswax with it. They also groom one another with their mandibles. And the reason I bring up all these different functions is bees have a lot of control over how much pressure they put on these mandibles. But also, top right, those are the hind legs without pollen, but those are the pollen baskets. Lower left, I want you to notice the mandibles spread apart and the proboscis swinging forward. And then lower right, I want you to notice that the contours on the mandibles perfectly match the outer diameter or radius of the proboscis once it comes together. It's 4 parts. So this is an incredibly well-designed piece of equipment, which I'm going to show you a little more about. This is a bee drinking through moss and algae at the edge of our pond. Now, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I want you to notice the photographic vantage point. This bee is photographed at water level so that you could appreciate it in the warmth and comfort of the basement of the library. Now, what if it were a video? You would probably be quite impressed, and it is. So, this bee has brought its mandibles together. What's it doing? It's drinking water. Bees need water more than anything else. They can metabolize nothing without it. How many of you have swimming pools and get visited by bees? Because the bees, once they find a water source that's dependable, it's always there. The bees return to that same source over and over. Even in the middle of winter, they need water or they can't metabolize the honey they've stored. The water in winter forms on the inside of the hive, on the interior walls, as condensation happens when we have a warm-up like we had yesterday. So then water bees are a specific function within the hive. They go through a series of jobs, but this water forager only collects water. It does not collect nectar. It won't go after honey or anything else. I'll show you a close-up again. It's drinking through sand. But if you notice too, when it brings its proboscis together, it creates a straw, and they can actually suck light liquids through this proboscis. Now that was something that was questioned as recent as 2 years ago, whether or not they could even suck anything into their body that way. But they actually can, and so we did videos to show that this is possible by preventing them from extending their tongue too far. And then the tongue only had to make contact with the light liquid and they could draw it in just like a straw. So it's very interesting, light liquids. I know it's exciting to you. Let's move on. Now let's have them drink something thicker. And now look at the proboscis. It's completely open. Now the tongue, which is called the glossa, I know that's important for you to know that term, is covered in what? Hairs. It's covered in hairs. So when they stick the tongue out, the hairs all fan out, get as much of that honey that they can, and then they're drawing it in. So bees go after high sucrose sources. So whatever the highest sugar content is, whether it's a flower or you left a soda can out or something like that, bees are drawn to that. If it becomes a dependable source, then they return to it over and over again. So stay away from the Welch's factory. If you've got honeybees, you'll have purple honey. So, oh my goodness, I almost went forward, but I have to stop and marvel at the cinematography here. That bee is backlit. If you've, you could applaud if it were considered above. I love that non-GMO organic response right there. So bees are fun to watch, but here's something else. Some people put out sugar for their bees. Beekeepers in particular like to put sugar bricks on top. And I want to show, and this is a little choppy on this video, but these bees are trying to liquefy crystallized sugar, okay? It takes a lot of effort. They end up drilling little holes, and if you look down here at the bottom, even the tongues kind of come back out. So what I was trying to learn is whether or not they're damaging their tongues. Are they losing hairs, right? So would I catch a bee, clip off its tongue and look at it and say, hey, did you lose some hairs, Or we could actually cut out the crystallized sugar after they've been feeding there, look at that under extreme magnification. I'm getting approval up front. And then look for the hairs there, and I discovered it was very dramatic. I did find 2 hairs after a whole afternoon of looking at samples, so we'll abandon that thought. And then there's fondant. The bees access that much better. Beekeepers use this as a way to provide emergency resources for your bees in winter this time of year. They could use up their honey and then end up starving out. And remember, these are managed colonies. These are not feral, living in trees and things like that. See the little tongue in the plastic there? But I want you to really pay attention to their feet. We're distracted by the fact that they're eating, but look how they're holding on to a smooth surface. See the little claws? How many of you can do the Vulcan thing? Okay, so they have 4 claws like that, right? But if you had to hold on to things like that, it needs to have kind of a rough surface to hook onto it. So they have something else. They have these little suction cups built in, and I'm going to tell you the name for that, but we're going to show it later. I just want you to see this process. Lower right, some above average image maker captured the bee burping out a little piece of honey so that then it could strake it back in the middle shot there and rub the pollen to the back, and then the hind legs are up in the air in the back, rubbing them together with their pollen brushes or pollen combs in some cases. And then they pack the pollen in the back and they fly away. This happens really fast. So if there were a video at the top, you would see how quickly all this happens. they're also cleaning their antenna in this process, right? And he's off. There you go. That was a lot of fun right there. We're looking at the hairs. This is the kind of hair that everyone in here wishes they had. Lots of split ends, more volume, you can really poof it up. And then just walking places, you would generate a static charge and you would look like a dandelion when you got there. You ever see kids with long hair jumping on a trampoline and it all goes straight out? I think that's the best. Anyway, bees generate a static charge when they're flying through the air. They land on a flower. The static charge interacts with the flower and the pollen on it. The pollen flies onto the bee voluntarily. And then the bee has to deal with it. Sometimes bees go to plants that only produce pollen. Sometimes they go to plants that only produce nectar. And sometimes they go to plants that produce pollen and nectar. So what I want you to do, if you're not a beekeeper, is provide resources for pollinators so that those who are beekeepers can benefit from you along with their bees. So please, as soon as you leave here, go to stands, spend everything you have. Now, part of the anatomy. This is something you would never see unless it were really magnified. They clean their antennas with this. It goes around. Now, this is another cool thing. The antenna has a radius and a diameter, right? And doesn't that match perfectly with the tib and fib, tibula and fibula of the bee? And so the anatomists have called this what? The antenna cleaner. Gosh. So you guys are so afraid to put yourselves out. Well, I would call it the antenna cleaner. All right, so once again, now this is super slow motion video of a bee hovering over, and it's doing all the things that we've described. It's getting the nectar from its tongue. It's grooming back the pollen. This bee stuck around for a while. This is 1,000 frames per second. So even it's 6 seconds in real time, but a minute and like 14 seconds, the way you're seeing it here. But what I want you to notice is honeybees have 4 wings. All bees do. Flies have 2. So there are mimics. There are bee flies, and you can tell by the number of wings. Their wings hook together, and what I want to talk to you about is, look at the left there, you probably can't read it, 226.8 plus or minus 12 beats per second. Honeybees beat their wings at that frequency, whether they're loaded or not. Now this is interesting, I'll explain it in a second. So they can pick up 30% of their body weight on their hind legs alone for the pollen. They can pick up a combined weight, pollen and nectar, of 90% of their body weight. What's cool about that is the frequency of their wing beats do not change. What changes is the range of motion. So when it's light loaded, it's doing this. When it carries a heavy load, it's doing this at the same frequency. That's not impressive? You? Okay. So there is, by the way, these sounds are very interesting because there's something called the sonic bloom. Respond to the frequency of the insect that attends to the plant. There's a book, since we're in a library, it's called The Secret World of Plants. If you don't have that book, get that book before you leave. If they only have 1 or 2 copies, run to the card catalog. Anyway, do they still have card catalogs? So the reason is, it's the latest research on how plants know when you're looking at them. Plants know when you're trimming the plant in a bad way. Plants sense the presence of other plants and animal interactions, favorable and negative. They respond to bees in a way that's different than they would respond to an insect that's going to consume the plant. It's interesting, and they communicate the threat to adjacent plants in the area. Okay, enough of that. Let's move on. I'm here to talk about bees. Inside the hive, we're going to move through that kind of quick. Hives are organized in a very predictable way. Usually there's an entrance in the bottom if this were a tree. And then the bees work their way up. So the first thing nearest to the entrance is where they raise their brood. So that's where the eggs are, and then they've got their larval state. Then they go into a cap state, which is pupa. And then they emerge as an adult bee. So when people say, oh, look at the baby bee, there are no baby bees. They're adults. The minute they emerge from their cell, they're adult bees. So what I'm just panning down, of course, is in an observation hive, and that's all the great honey that everybody wants to get off of them. A normal colony of bees would produce well over 100 pounds of honey. And here in Erie County, they need about 40 to 60 pounds of that to get through a winter. So what beekeepers take off is kind of limited depending on your management practices. And on this side, all these cinnamon caps on the cells, those are all pupa state bees. So if we're looking at that, we can all see them emerge, and so they feed them pollen. The pollen is fed by the nurse bees, but it's not fed as pollen. It goes through a fermentation period. So the bees store the pollen in the cells and they mix it with honey. So then it starts to ferment. And after about 48 hours, they start to seal it up, and then it's used and consumed by nurse bees that are attending to open pupa, right? And then they're feeding them day and night during the development stage. And once they're capped, of course, there's no more feeding, but they have to keep them warm, 94 to 97 degrees, day and night, no matter what the temperature is outside. Bees are doing that right now in their hives. Pretty impressive. Oh my gosh, I only have 10 minutes left. What am I gonna do?
Take as long as you want.
3 hours, what? Okay.
That's fine.
So now what's going on here? This is what every beekeeper wants to see. You look at your hive, and aren't they animated? This is not a rave. This is bees that are swarming. They've decided to go. They've made a new queen. And before the new queen can emerge from her cell, they need to get the old existing queen out of the way so she gets evicted. 70% of the bees in this hive are going to leave. It looks like they're all going to go because they kind of changed their minds. A whole bunch of them fly out. I know you want to see this. Let's see the queen leaving. If the beekeeper were above average, he could video a queen departing the hive. And if you look at this landing board, see the big orange abdomen there, almost at the leading edge? I know this is going to be hard. There's a queen right there, and she's walking back now, and she's at the edge, and she went, did you see her?
Yes.
Who did not see her? Okay, I can't do anything for you. Let's move on. The queen left. Now here's the thing, the queen is not in charge. Queen's not in charge. They're reproducing as a superorganism now, and if you're on social media at all, this is where everybody goes, there's a bunch of bees in my yard, there's a bunch of bees on my tree, there's swarms. Okay, this is what's going on. Now if you're a beekeeper, they're going to the top of that blue spruce tree about 14, 15 feet up. I can't get them. So here's where I mess with them because I'm an above average beekeeper and I know that they're driven by pheromones. So what did I do? I took a queen mandibular pheromone, which everyone has in their refrigerator, and I put it on a lower branch, and I got those workers to change their minds and move down to a lower branch right at eye level so I could video them and use it later at a library presentation. And there they are, doing what I want them to do. And then the queen had to go with them. The queen is not making this decision. When bees leave a hive and they're creating another colony, they don't go straight to the cavity they've chosen to move into. They go to an intermediate bivouac. So when they show up on your mailbox, on your front porch, if they're hanging on a railing, they're not moving in. Don't worry, they're hanging out. There are scouts that are still going out and verifying the final destination, and then they will eventually move on to that. It doesn't mean you shouldn't let a beekeeper know, and you should, but this is where I decided to play with them. I'm gonna move along a little quicker. Here I call this a queen on a stick. I ordered a queen from California, Oliveras County, and a Carniolan queen, if anybody cares. And I decided I'm gonna test the pheromone thing. Do you remember at the beginning I said if your bee flew away, would she live? If she's generating pheromones and she's mated, she's valuable. So what are the chances that passerbys would fly into her pheromone stream and just join up with her? Well, I'll tell you what, the chances are pretty good. Because that bee that flew off that, keep in mind, she's from California, FedEx just delivered her, or UPS. By the way, UPS, FedEx, they love me. Because they never know, they just get these boxes that say live and it's got holes all over it. And I'm like, is my scorpion collection okay? So anyway, I put her on a stick and I told myself, if I can get a cluster around that cage before sunset, they will protect her. They don't know her. Here's the other thing, for those of you who celebrate the bee and how their integrity is so high. They're just flying by and they just join up to a random queen. They're leaving their colonies. The resources they gathered, they didn't take home. They just met someone and they're giving it all to her. So we created an artificial swarm And the reason I know that they don't have a queen with them, that I didn't just interrupt a swarm on the move, right, is because what we're seeing now is the fact that they flew away trying to get the queen in the cage to go with them, and she couldn't because somebody put her in a cage. And then they had to return to her because she couldn't move. Now they're under my control. I decide what they're going to do. I have manipulated them with my master brain. So I took the queen cage and I put it on top of an empty hive. And remember in the beginning, I like my bees to choose where they go. So then I'm going to just collect the traders that were on that tree. I'm going to collect them into my butterfly net, and I'm just going to put them in front of the hive. And if they want to stick with this queen that they just met the night before, instead of going home where they belong, I'm going to let them do that. So I put my little butterfly net up there. Here they are, all the traders collected in one place. They're gathered from all around. And they start sniffing around, and pretty soon one of them, through that opening right there, realizes, hey, the queen's in here, the one we just met that we prefer to our own queen, the old one at home. And I think we're going to join up. So let's fan our Nasonov glands, and let's get everybody to go in, and let's prove Fred right. And that's what they did, and I'm right. And so I managed them through pheromones, and this makes me above average, like bees. Move on. These are a bunch of drones on a landing board. It won't mean a lot to you, but when a queen flies out, gets mated in a drone congregation area, when she flies back, that comet of drones, a whole bunch of them follow her all the way home. It's like a bunch of uninvited guests. They show up at her parent colony, they force all the nurse bees in there to feed them, and then they all leave within a couple of hours. So unless you have a lot of time on your hands and can stare at your bees at length, which by the way is my job, my wife cannot put me to work when my job is to stare at bees and think about things. You get this, what I call a drone swarm. So that's evidence that I have a mated queen that's back in that colony. If I check them out in 4 more days, I'll see a bunch of eggs and developing larvae and stuff like that. So let me move on. Altruism is for females. So bees keep themselves clean, they self-evict. So when they're sick and dying, they're supposed to go away on their own and die in a field and let something eat them. So what do you think the drones do? They don't self-evict, they wait to be thrown out. We saw that in the beginning. So once again, they prove that you're gonna feed me till the last minute and I'm gonna make you carry me out. I'm not going to do it on my own. You're gonna use your resources at every part of your life to tend to me. So, and this is a cluster of bees on the outside of a hive. I'm gonna move on, that's not interesting. These are waggle dances being performed in super slow motion on the left. Bees do waggle dances to tell other bees where things are. In this case, they're in a swarm situation, and that's a forager that's come back, said I found something cool. And in slow motion, what I like about the waggle dances, she takes her abdomen and smacks them each in the face. So I know you want to see it on the right too. You have another video of that, Fred? Yes, I do. Look at the bee, hits them in the face. Now, if you didn't have super slow-mo, you would think they're just waggling and they have their antenna out and they're just sensing and they're finding out what direction it's in reference to the position of the sun. And no, they hit each other in the face, so it's like a mosh pit. Let's move on. Look at this grooming behavior. I love this story. The mandibles, remember? There's a grooming station inside the hive. These are hygienic bees. So they go up there, and if you go there and see them spread their wings out, they're like, groom me, I have something on me. Dr. Tom Seeley at Cornell did this research where what they did is they'd puff them with air, and the bee would be like, oh, what'd you put on me? And then they realize nothing's on them, and they don't react. If you puff them with air that has a little dirt and it sticks on their hairs, then they do a 4 waggle per second dance calling for grooming. And then the bees come and they clean them up. So if there's anything on them that doesn't, look how meticulous they are. This is just like going to the salon. So for all bees, and they just love it. And bees that are dirty, they come in and they go right to that spot and they wait to be groomed. And these groomers are obsessive compulsive. That's all they do. It's like they try to grab onto passersby. Do you need a grooming? They're like, no, get off me. And they just keep going. What's that? An above average picture of an eye. Let's move on. Mandibles, amazing. Move on. Oh, these are bees doing what we call deck washing or washboarding. If you look at old sailors back in the day with the wooden decks, they did holy stoning and they'd rub the decks. That's kind of what they're doing. I show it to you. Look at their front legs. They're going a mile a minute. So they think that maybe they're even putting out a pheromone, but it proved not to be the case because they also do this inside. It smooths the surface. Bees that have an overabundance of workers send them out to do stuff like this. If it's a colony that is barely surviving or needs every worker to do its job, they don't do this behavior on the outside. So at best, it's showing you that that colony is doing really well. Bees are known as being intelligent. We also know they're very clean. There's something inside the hive called an undertaker bee. Guess what their job is? They find dead bees, they take them out. You know they're very clean, right? So they want to find a dead bee and take it straight to the exit. Unless you're this undertaker, who we all know these people from work. Look at me, I found a dead bee. Instead of taking it out, she drags it all over the entire hive. She shows every bee that she's got a job. Here, touch it, it's dirty. Here, let me rub it on you, it's full of bacteria. Let me haul it around. And another undertaker bee tried to grab it away from her. She says, no, everybody needs to see I have a job and I'm doing it. All right, we're moving on. Eventually, she did take it out and did her job correctly. Let's move on. Bees can sound like if you go out at night in a bee yard, it sounds like somebody left a dryer vent running. They move the air at 6 miles per hour. And this is how they dry off the honey. They control the climate inside the hive. They need about 64 degrees relative humidity. Let's move on. And this is one of the things I wanted to show you. This is bees standing on Ziploc plastic bags. But if you look at the feet, when the little claws can't hold on to something, they spread apart, and there's something called the aurolium. Spell it backwards. Okay. The aurolium is a little pad that helps them hold on to smooth surfaces. That's why they can stick on your window. That's why they can stick on the ceiling, right? So now that you've seen that magic, we'll move on. Sorry about this one. Okay, listen, it's a jumping spider. Based on statistics, 1 out of 100 people should run out of the room. Since no one's running, and it's a library, so you're more higher functioning than some people. Our daughter left the front seat of our van and ended up in the back seat one day. It was the greatest gymnastic move I've ever seen in my life because a tiny spider came out of a vent. Now, if you're a honeybee, this is a jumping spider. If you're ever gonna like a spider, the bull jumping spider is it. Super smart. Look at these eyes. See how big they are? They also engage you. Try to sneak up on one. They pinwheel and look right at you. If you're a photographer and you're getting a close-up look and it disappears because they jump really fast, up to 50 times the length of their body, where is it now? It's on you. Okay. Look, it's got its fangs out. That doesn't mean anything. Let's move on. So there's a jumping spider. What does it do? Runs right out on the landing board, nabs a worker, injects it right where the engine is in the thorax, and walks away with it. The guard bees don't even care. Now, here's the thing. I mentioned earlier frequencies of different insects, right? Did you know the jumping spider, not only can it see the moon, look it up. That's weird. What's the practical purpose of that? I don't know. But they see things, they can hear. It's a spider that can hear. You know what a mud dauber wasp is? Mud dauber wasps have their own frequency. And when a mud dauber wasp flies nearby and that jumping spider hears it, it disappears. Because mud daubers will even land in a spider's web, create a ruckus like it's stuck in the web. When the spider comes out to get it, the mud dauber grabs the spider and flies away. Now, I've been told by entomologists that mud dauber nests, those little flutes, right? If you cut them open, she said it was like Halloween and Christmas combined. Because you can see what they're foraging on, and often you pull it open, it can even be full of spiders. I know, isn't that disgusting? And then they go out, they go to plants, they think they're safe, and there's another species of jumper waiting for them on the plants. Let's move on. I started getting interested in jumping spider. They remember you. Every beekeeper that's opened a lid has found a jumping spider. So I thought, they like me. This one knows me. They're females too, so you know they're friendly. So let me get over here, and this one, doesn't it see me and come towards me? And guess what else it does? No, it's a jumper, but no, she just wants to wave. Look, it's, hey Fred, it's me, it's Gladys, remember me? See that? But she's like, she's like, I know you, remember you let me eat the bees and everything? And then you check in with an arachnologist, they go, no, Fred, listen, that's a threat display. That spider thought it could take you. So knowledge is power. When you see that, hello, how you doing? No, she wants to take you down, so just keep going. Skunks eat bees. Here's a cluster of bees in the middle of the summer when it's really hot. They get outside. This little skunk knocks them down, runs away. This is at nighttime. The skunk cannot see the light, comes back. Skunks will feed on honeybees for hours at a time. They eat your bees. So once they've decided they can't eat the bees, we decide just to get them up and out of the way. I happen to like skunks. I like them a lot. They'll dig out ground wasps and hornets and eat them. They're a great cleanup crew. They come through, they eat dead bees on the ground. She's a murderer, so we'll move on. So we raised the hive, the landing board. I raised it different heights to see how high can a skunk really go. So this landing board is at 18 3/4 of an inch off the ground. Think about that. These floor tiles, think about the height. So Miss Tippy Toes McGillicuddy over here comes back. Even though we raised it that 18 3/4, look, she's jumping up on her tiptoes, scratching at it. The bees come out to guard it. Honey bees do not see to fly at night. What they do is they crawl on everything. So if you go out to check your bees at night, not smart. If you're bringing a flashlight with you, give it to your friend. They go after the light. So I decided what I'm going to do with this skunk here is I'm going to settle her hatch, because look, there's bees all over. They're even crawling down the legs of the support trying to get to the skunk. They just can't see her. So what am I thinking? What if I provided the white light necessary for the bees to get the skunk? I mean, I don't want you to see this. This is really horrific what you're about to see here. So here's the white light. It came on. It's motion activated. Here comes the skunk. The bees can now come and get her as soon as she touches the landing board, but the skunk realizes there's a white light and she doesn't do it. She robbed me of a viral YouTube there. Moving on, what is this plant? It's a milkweed. Yeah, who said that, by the way? Of course. Okay. So, but what I want you to see, now I want to tell you a story about milkweeds. Every time you see a poster of a milkweed, what do you see on the poster?
Butterfly.
What kind of butterfly?
Monarch.
What does a monarch do? Reproduces on the milkweed. I'm going to tell you something about that. Milkweeds don't like monarchs. I know you're in dead silent. Is he about to put his foot in his mouth? Let me tell you this. What that milkweed wants to do is to kill those monarch caterpillars. What is the monarch doing? Providing parasites for the milkweed. Is the monarch butterfly pollinating the milkweed? No. She's putting her eggs on it, and what are those going to do? They're going to hatch. There's going to be little caterpillars. What are the caterpillars going to do? They're going to eat the host plant, the only host plant for the reproduction of the monarch butterfly. The milkweed wants to generate latex, blow it into the mouth of those little caterpillars, and kill them. That's what she's trying to do. The plant is the she. Okay. But there is a pollinator, and that's why I bring it in. It's not the butterfly. All those posters should go away, and it should be a honeybee instead of the butterfly, because the honeybee is the one that's reproducing the best when it comes to milkweeds, because they get these little pollen packs stuck on their feet, and they drag them into, see these little feet? Amber paddles here? Oh man, I wish my cursor showed up there. They stick to the feet of the bee parks them on there, and look, she's planting them in the milkweed floret there. And so when you see these little pods of milkweed seeds, that has nothing to do with monarch butterfly. All the monarch butterfly did was reproduce and try to kill the plant, and the plant tried to kill the butterfly. Borage is really cool, feeds nectar to the bees, replenishes itself every 2 minutes. Remember, we need pollen, water, nectar, minerals. I need you to plant as many flowers and resources for the bees as you possibly can, so every beekeeper near you will get the full benefit of that and not share the honey with you. And then this is hyssop. It's one of my favorites. I highly recommend blue giant hyssop or agastaki or anise hyssop. And then, of course, sunflowers are great. This bee looks like it froze to death. It did not. It's in chill torpor, chill coma, and then it warmed up and it flew away, because bees can take temps all the way down to 29 degrees as individuals. So I'm going to move on. Here's a bee that's not dead. She's got her foot sticking there, so she will warm up and fly away later. Here's another test. We're moving on because we're out of time. Don't forget the drones. They're put upon by the bees. Always pass on what you know to little kids like the smart aleck that lives here. I mean, my grandson, who is recording bee sounds, and he's probably going to take those and check some recently published study at some lame institution like University of Florida and see if they're right. And just remember that bees are above average. That's the end of my presentation.